Thank you, everyone. It's a great honor to be here. I was going to ask if you can hear me, but I can hear myself reverberating, which is quite surreal. So, Modern Greek Goētia, or goeteia, as we call it. Ask a dozen occultists, you'll get a dozen explanations. Commonly, the word tends to conjure, pardon the inevitable pun, it tends to conjure either the concept of some kind of ceremonial magic, a catalogue of named spirits, ranks of demons, sigils, a system of summoning power and control. Often, always centered on a solitary operator seeking revelation, mastery, and a ritual technology of power. More recently, thanks to the work of the late, great Jake Stratton Kent, we have a more back to the roots revival movement also emerging, reflecting an older pre-Christian Mediterranean spirit lore. And Jake was right about a lot of this, those of you who are familiar with his work. And the aim was to restore the figure of the Rhois, the wandering lone ritualist or outsider. However, the problem with this idea is that it is often framed through Western ideals of secrecy, transgression, rebellion, and anti-establishment identity. And the problem with this is that it reflects modern Western projections. But the Greek reality is something else entirely, because the Greek reality is that in the Greek-speaking world, goetia evolves into yities, and yities is simply a 7th century evolution of the word, referring to charms, spellwork, spellcraft, engaging with the living world, with the spirits of place, effecting change with directed will through the use of voice, gesture, intent, but always in a collective context, always as part of the community, never, as we also heard yesterday, as an act of power, never as an act of solitary gathering power to oneself, but always with the aim of restoring right relation with spirits. And all this sits within a cosmology that you will find is familiar, but as a cosmology and a way of being in the world that is very much alive, that was never broken, that was never ruptured, and that does not need reconstructing. And that's the gist of what I'm going to try and cover. But first, let's just get some terminology right, because the translation being what it is. As I said, the term goetia, when used correctly for the Greek context, refers to Greek folk magic, Greek vernacular magic, very unglamorous, very mud under the fingernails, very midwives bringing spells to the bedside and wreathing the woman about to give birth in charms and so on. Very much nailing plague in the fields. You know, we have ethnographic documentation of priests performing binding spells to nail the plague. We have a documentation of a priest, a Byzantine priest, calling a known witch to help uncurse his wife. The priest couldn't manage it, but the witch could. And she found the spell hidden in a shoe. So yities refers to all of this, but it refers to more as well, as we'll see. Now magic, the word magia in Greek has gone through a couple of shifts in meaning, and from the sacred art, as it were, as it was borrowed from the Persian, it eventually came to mean malevolent magic. And there won't be time for the detail of that, but I will direct you to where you can read more later. So magia from the Byzantine period on is inherently negative, and so is pharmakia. Pharmakia is worse. Pharmakia means poisoning, it means potions, it means binding, it means intervening with free will. And interfering with free will of another is the greatest, quote-unquote, crime within the sort of Greek mindset. It's the one thing one must not do. And these are the only forms of, quote-unquote, sorcery that were ever persecuted. And in fact, usually it was 2 to 6 years of excommunication, followed by penance, followed by embrace back into the community. And yes, there is documentation for all this. And there are some known executions only when lethal harm was done. There were no witch hunts in the Byzantine world. There were no witch hunts in the Greek world. The rest of the terms we will meet as we go, but what you're looking at in the picture there is a couple of pages from a folk grimoire that I bought off the internet from a major bookstore. Folk grimoires containing these spells in Greece circulate widely. Everyone has a few. I've got about a dozen, but then I'm studying them. But you find them in every home, and as you see, it's handwritten. These are facsimile replicas. And these simply collect together spells recorded from monks, from priests, from midwives, from grandmothers. Many of them are named in here, and each of the grimoires often names the person they were collected from. This is how our folk wisdom continues to circulate among us today. So the basic claims I'm making are these four, preposterous as they may come across. Magic never died in Greece or the Greco-Byzantine, let's say, sphere. And let me just make a disclaimer right now. The same applies to most of the Balkans. The same applies to the Near East. Many of the traditions and many of the practices are extremely similar. I'm focusing on the Greek context because I'm staying in my lane, and that's the language I have, and it's also the experiential contact I have. So no disrespect to neighboring countries and cultures, okay? But magic and the sense of an enchanted world never died. And we'll find out why shortly. Neoplatonic theurgy. We talk about, sometimes I see some people mourning the loss of pagan wisdom and pagan practice, but it's folded right into the liturgy, and shortly we'll see how. Goētia we've covered. It's domestic, it's ordinary, it's public, it's not secret at all, okay? It's ordinary. From the way we clink our glasses when we drink, first we call our dead and remember them, and then we break the connection right in the moment of raising a glass, or in the way that we banish the evil eye, which is actually perceived as a personified spirit of malevolence, of envy, or of wasted potential. And all of this within a participative practice to which the vast majority, I would say, of Greeks in one or other way are aware of, some actively practicing, more than I actually realized, frankly, when I began researching this stuff. And the obvious elephant in the room is, of course, but Christianity, right? Well, as I said yesterday, in fact, the moment we got the Roman Empire centralizing power, it was a one-way path to monotheism, and it was a one-way path to monotheism whether that one god was going to be called Helios, Mithras, if they'd let in women, Christ, all right, or Allah. One way or another, we would have wound up with monotheism because that's how the centralization of power worked, and they needed one oath to bind all those diverse communities of mercenary legionnaires, and they also needed one ritual calendar for social cohesion. So, in a nutshell, I've run the simulation several times with various parameters. There is no way we do not end up with monotheism around the time of late antiquity. And we talk about the exclusionary thinking of Christianity. Well, exclusionary thinking and actions begin among the Neoplatonists. And if we actually trace the history from one generation of Neoplatonist scholars to the next, we discover that each generation very much shaped and controlled what was accepted as quote-unquote Platonic orthodoxy in the school. And Proclus was the greatest of them, but there won't be time to go into that. However, even under this centralized elite, we mustn't forget about the ordinary folk, the illiterate folk, the people for whom the spirit at the spring was real, the people for whom, if the pig died, if the sheep died, the family died. And these are the people who kept these traditions going when a woman was giving birth and something was going wrong. This is where the true vernacular magic lived, is recorded, is documented in the archaeology, in the material culture, and in the few polemics that we find from the church complaining that we cannot eradicate these practices, so we're not going to try, we're just going to baptize them. So what we ended up getting was the practices carried right along quite merrily, and all the church did was add another accretion on top because they couldn't stop the people doing what they did. All of this is taking place in a world that is very much reliant, and again, I'm in the sort of turn towards Christianity, late antiquity period, within a world that is based on Proclean cosmology, largely based on Proclean cosmology with a good dose of iamblichus and iamblician ritual. And this is the cosmology to this day that provides the epistemology for how the Greco-Byzantines and Greeks perceive more or less the world and our place in it. And this is again where we see such a great difference with other forms of Christianity in their later iterations. Because if we judge everything by a Roman Catholic lens or a Protestant lens, then immediately we end up with a kind of duality. We don't have the concept of hell in the Greek worldview. What there's absence from light. And this derives from Pseudo-Dionysus effectively modifying the Proclean cosmology into a form that made a little bit of space for Christology and kept all the rest. And so we end up with the celestial sphere, the human sphere, but that is also inhabited and populated by disembodied spirits, which are as real as you and I. And it's a good idea to leave an offering at certain springs, and some of them like honey, but some of them like nuts. And if you live locally, you know which one likes which. Ritual is a constant negotiation across these boundaries with the aim always of bringing right relation. We heard the word yesterday. In English, you would say eusebeia. The word is ephsevia. It means respect. It is often mistranslated as piety, but it is not piety in the sense of the connotations it has accrued. So within this context, you then have ritual specialists. They are monks, they are wandering monks, they are lay physicians, they are village priests, they are midwives. Let's not underestimate the role of women. Women mattered a heck of a lot in this world, and they still do. We have a lot of stereotypical, I believe, misconceptions about this, but the truth is this whole continuum is mediated by the acts and the role of women. And we have, again, documentation of Byzantine empresses from very early on being extremely powerful. We have one doing sorcery in her chamber as an invading army advanced. We have another doing alchemy in her chamber. I've written about these. I'll give you the QR code to go find out more at the end. Always the objective is to bring things back to balance and to bring things back to harmony and into right relation. It's about keeping the collective cohesive. It is not about personal power. It is never about personal power. That might be true, perhaps, for the elite authorities, but only for them. And that's political, it's not magical. So there are basically two streams of transmission of these traditions. I talked about Neoplatonism being folded into the liturgy. Effectively, we have Pseudo-Dionysius, who in, again, the Orthodox context is considered equal to the apostles. We don't know his true identity. We don't need to. As far as the Orthodox Church is concerned, everything starts and ends with him. We have Maximus the Confessor, who effectively modifies and canonizes Dionysius' cosmology in the 7th century. And then, thenceforth, it becomes the bedrock of orthodoxy. And the ritual that goes with it folds in Neoplatonic theurgy. It's even called theurgy. So what you're looking at right here is the ecumenical patriarch, who is basically the Orthodox Pope, but we don't really have a Pope. He's just first among equals. There's no such thing as infallibility and so on and so forth. We don't have that either. There is a plurality of voice. Theologians do disagree. There is no one hard and fast rule. There is the canon, and then there are dissenting voices and ongoing negotiation. That's how it works. But as far as the ritual grammar is concerned, it is no different, really. Instead of animating statues, the liturgy animates the congregation. And if you ever sit through a Sunday liturgy in an Orthodox church, and of course I'm going to say sit through a Greek one because that's the one where you can see it better, if you like. But if you sit through an Orthodox liturgy of any sort, you will actually see just how well designed the sensory elements are to target every single sense. The chanting is still based on Pythagorean harmonics. There's a lot of talk sometimes about the vocus magicae, how to pronounce the vowel sounds. Listen to an Orthodox service. And on the vernacular side, these things are passed down mainly through oral tradition. They began writing them down about end of the 19th century or thereabouts. Most of these practices are still within living tradition. I asked my 23-year-old stepdaughter the other day, I was like, your grandmother's 95. Her grandmother's illiterate. She's a shepherdess. I was like, has your grandmother ever talked to you about anything, ever taught you anything? Oh, she says, you mean yes? Yes, I know how to do the oil drop test of the evil for the evil eye. I know how to do this, know how to do that. This is a Gen Z girl. And I didn't even need to ask her. I said to her, I was going to ask you to, see what you can maybe write down from what your grandmother says. Oh, no, she said, I have these conversations all the time. And there I am chasing after old village women to see what they know before they die off, you see. So it's alive and kicking, and I've already covered this part, so I'll just skip it. The most important thing really for me to get across is it's ordinary. It's everywhere. It's funny, for however many years I've been in academia, often enough people have kind of said, well, come on then, what's your practice? And I've always been kind of, guys, I don't have one. I'm a scholar. I don't look like one, but I really am. I'm an artist. That's why I look funny. But you know what I realized quite recently really, is that this has always been part of our lives. Most of us, I know there are Greeks in the audience. If you tell us this is magic, we'll argue, we'll be shocked. It's not done. We do not call, this is not magic. This is tradition. Doxero. This is tradition, okay? And Yityes, again, I asked my 23-year-old stepdaughter, and I said, so what about the word yityes? Does this sound bad to you, good to you? Nah, she said, it's just a descriptor. It's neutral. Okay, this is just like the tip of the iceberg of my field work, but I'm telling you, it's in the family, so. Okay, now, how is this passed down? Manuals left by midwives. What we call iatrosophika. Iatrosophika are a mix of lay medical manuals, herbal law, and you get this mix with what we can only call magical, spells and rituals, descriptions, and so on, and the herbs you need for it, and the incense you need for it, and which saints to call on, because the saints are very important. But then again, the saints have they're just new names that have been given to the old gods, because if I told you who Saint Barbara is, you'd probably throw tomatoes at me. But Saint Barbara is Hecate, for the record. And I have an article on that where you can find the evidence. So a child is born, the fates are invoked to come and fate the child. The midwife or the grandmother will walk to the church with a stone in her shoe to lead away the bad luck, so that the child only gets the good fate. That's in one region. We have regional variations. And we have strands making it into these manuals that come straight from the PGM, that come straight from the Testament of Solomon. The ritual formula is almost identical in many cases. And that come from the Kyranides, and that come from Dioscorides' herbal compendium. These are the sources. They're very well attested in Byzantium. Again, I've done quite a lot of work on that, and it's already online. It's available for those who really want to track the detail. But all of this is folded into a palimpsest. It is not, there is a continuity in terms of the practice, the functions, some of the detail, but it is gloriously, gloriously entangled with traditions from other cultures that were all in this great melting pot we call the Byzantine Empire. And effectively, what that gives us is a form of continuity that is not pristine. And frankly, if anybody ever claims there is a pristine continuity, well, I would be indeed very doubtful. It's a very dangerous word in academia. It's an extremely dangerous word if you're a Greek, because we've been accused of all sorts of things when we claim continuity. We are not claiming that this is from antiquity, some kind of pristine survival. No, because cultures evolve according to the needs of the day. What we do have is things that worked and practices that functioned. We have the same exact phenomenology, we have the same ritual formulae, and they adapt as they go. So did Christianity kill magic? Well, if magic means voice, gesture, intention, communication with the spirit, that you might as well be able to see, because it's just over there, it lives by the well. You've got to remember to take it at streets. Okay, with respect, always. There's one at the crossroads near where I live, and it's very upset because somebody knocked over its shrine. That needs fixing soon, because it's right near my house as well. I don't really like it being upset. Did Christianity kill magic? Well, if this isn't magic, I'd love someone to tell me what it is. Did it go underground? Because sometimes people say, oh, well, it's veiled, it's hidden. It's not hidden, and it's not veiled. We don't talk about it as if it's magic, because we don't need to. There is no sense of something occulted. Byzantium didn't hunt witches. We've already covered that. Only specific cases. Again, the documentation is there. It's in Byzantine studies. This stuff has already been studied and published upon. It simply lives in a niche discipline that I guess not enough people are aware of. And is this covert pagan survival? No, it's overt pagan survival, and we call it something else, and the word pagan doesn't really work for us. But that's another conversation for another day. Do we have the same demonic hierarchy? We do not. We have mostly pre-Christian Mediterranean demonic entities, many of which are personified powers that have become distorted in one or other way. There's no time for detail. We do not have a demonic hierarchy like the Latin West has. Maybe Beelzebub is about the only one that's mentioned in the Bible, and one or two others. Satan's just doing God's job for him. But and demons too can be redeemed. And again, I've written about this both in my Paladin book, because he was onto this, and elsewhere. If it's not magic, shall we call it superstition? Well, superstition isn't an analytical or historical term. It's actually a term used to criticize something we don't really understand or to criticize something we find hyperbolic. But is this something that a majority believes in and practices to a greater or lesser degree, so much so that it comes naturally? Yes, it is. So maybe we're all superstitious. And I covered the continuity and palimpsest point. You can imagine this as there being a core of practices that was always there, covered in accretions. And the same applies to the Greek language. I sometimes hear this business of, oh, you speak modern Greek, it's a corrupted version, you don't understand ancient Greek. Well, actually, no, the syntax is simplified, but it's still the same language with added meanings. We kept the old meanings and just kept building on the same language. And we pronounce it the way we pronounce it. So, in closing, a couple of the most important really things to take away here. Goetia is real. Goetia is, for us, is just tradition. It's something we do at the kitchen table, we do it in a restaurant, we do it when a child has a fever, we do it when we're mortally terrified of something. Spirits are real too. They're our neighbors. They are situated in place. This is not something you can learn from a book. This is truly something you cannot learn from a book. But I hear perhaps someone might say, but can't we learn it? What? Is this this is not exceptionalism. This is not exclusivism. But it does require ephsevia, respect. One needs to actually come into contact with the land. It's very much like other indigenous traditions where one would not dream of simply uprooting something and reapplying it. Because in this context, Greek goetia, yities, paradosi, tradition, is something that has to be lived as a community. And everybody is welcome to join that community as long as they have ephsevia. So for those who really want the evidence, because some of this is utterly preposterous, I know, there's the QR code. It just published 15 minutes ago. It's got all the slides, and it's got all the links to where you can find both my development on these and the bibliography. And the rest is in the books. Thank you very much.